Now, if I was to define consent in marriage, I'll give it a double approach. It's two-pronged because number one, there is consent to marriage itself. Who do you want to marry? And that is defined under the Constitution. That would be Article 45(2). Each and every person is free to marry a person of the opposite sex, and it is based on free consent. So the two parties should consent to each other. Okay. And that is the moment when they say, I do. Now, from that moment of I do, I would go to the second part of consent, and this is the consent to conjugal activities, consent to sex. The fact that Paul Kauko, when a lady says, I do, on the wedding day, it does not give a blanket perpetual certificate for sex each and every time a man wants. So now we go to consent within the institution of marriage. And this is where every time maybe the conjugal activity to take place, it is not the man to decide. The lady has to give consent. So that will be my second definition of consent. One, when you say I do, and the next one is when actually the sexual part is to take place. And that brings marital rape, and that's what I think we are talking about today, right?
Okay, yes. Thank you. Mr. Kauko, so what does consent in marriage mean to you?
Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Apollo. I think Apollo has, Apollo has expounded consent, and I like his definition. But I would also want to give it another limb. I would wish to equate marriage to a contract, because legally, when we define contract, we usually say this is an agreement between two or more parties. Two or more parties, an agreement, and then there is that element of that is legally binding. Legally binding means in the event there is breach of what you guys have agreed on, or what the man and the woman have agreed on, you can always seek remedy. And marriage is usually equated to that contract. But even when I'm speaking about the contract, the key component here is the agreement bit. And the agreement is usually defined as the meeting of the mind. And that's where I derive the definition of consent, the meeting of the mind. Are you in sync? When a man and a woman enter into a marriage, are you in sync? Is there that meeting of the mind? Because that's where everything is. And meeting of the mind, let me give you an analogy of what meeting of the mind is. Judy, you've asked me to bring over a cow to you. So I'm transporting this cow from Kiambu to Mala.
Yeah.
Okay. That is the agreement. We've talked over the phone that I should deliver that, that cow. And then I walk the cow all the way from Kiambu to Mala. I'm assuming there are no vehicles. So it takes me let's say 12 hours. On arrival in Mala, Judy says, okay. If Apollo was called upon to adjudicate over that issue, the first question Apollo would ask himself is, was Paul a madman to walk a cow all the way from Kiambu to Mala for 12 hours? It means there was some sort of agreement. There was some sort of meeting of the mind. There was an agenda that was discussed. I would equate consent to that in the sense that people who come together having rationalized how they would wish to live together and stuff like that. So for me that is consent, as long as people understand each other and they know what they are getting into. But I would also wish to say, just because there is meeting of the mind, there's nothing automatic.
Yeah.
Just because we agreed we are doing 1, 2, 3, 4, it's not a license to do everything else. Your meeting of the mind is we are living together, and then even as we proceed, the meeting of the mind becomes the basis. That is the legal bit. Okay. But now, practice-wise, is that consent means once I've married Judy, Judy is my subject. You get? And that is something, as an African society, we've been, it's something that we've been struggling with, the same way. I've had people saying, I know I'm digressing kidogo, but I'm still speaking to consent.
Okay.
Because consent starts at, I've married Judy. That's it. Everything else must follow that script. Married Judy. Everything else must have married you, so everything I say passes. You get? And that is the root cause, and that is for me, the root cause of the problems. Because everything I say passes, and it's based on socialization. And if you would allow me to say something here, for the longest time, allow me just to say something Kibuda Kibwana said, because we are speaking about consent, and marriage. Something Kibuda Kibwana said. He said, when men rationalize violence against women, when men rationalize consent, within the confines of marriage, there's something psychological behind it and something social behind it, because they say for the longest time men have assumed superiority over women in all aspects of life. And this superiority has known no limits, and women have been at the behest of all manner of violence executed by men. So the question, therefore, that we must ask ourselves is, what makes men believe that they have right to exercise violence against women? So this thing can be, in an attempt to answer that question, Kivuta Kibwana argues that from the cradle to the grave, men are exposed to several myths and excuses. So it's about myths and excuses.
Okay.
So it's about me as a man. I've married Judy. So consent for me is an excuse to do everything I want. For me, it's a myth. I have to do this. But I think we are going to get into that.
Okay, just hapo tushikilie hapo kwa meeting of the minds, and back to Apollo on his definition of what consent is, also to add on what you have said. So why do you think consent is important, even beyond after the wedding day, after the traditional wedding? Because Paul has talked about meeting of the mind. So where do these minds stop? Like, because if we meet, there's an end to that meeting. So where do I say, no, I'm not interested. No, not today. No, not now. No, not never. So when does it stop, Apollo?
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, let me say life is not constant. How you were yesterday is not the same way you are today.
Yeah.
And things change from time to time. If I'll go back to history in law, the way we inherited common law from the British, there is a doctrine called the Hale Doctrine. That is, it was by Sir Matthew Hale back in 17th century. And he ruled what Paul was saying, that a wife is actually cannot claim to be raped by the husband. There is nothing like marital rape. That was a doctrine that was back in 17th century. And it actually was changed in 1991. So you can see the amount of time that went by. But let me say this. If you marry Paul, you marry Judy, and you expect everything from her anytime you want, I think you are not observing actually her dignity or the inherent rights. Actually, you could be abusing human rights, because what about the days per month when they are undergoing their menstruals? Would you still demand sexual conjugal favors from your wife just because you paid the bride price? Or what about when she's sick? Would you still demand that? And that is where our problem is. Actually, consent should be there. Women should not be treated like property. The fact that you paid bride price was just a sign, and it was not as commercialized as it is now. Although now coming back to where Paul talks about meeting of the minds, and I think Paul is going overboard there. He's commercializing marriage. I don't think it should be.
Just to before Paul I could address, now that you've said going back in history,
Yes,
you've talked about
the Hell Doctrine.
yes,
Yeah.
and you've said that they said there's nothing like marital rape.
Yeah.
It does not exist.
Yeah.
So how about today? How is it addressed under our laws? Do the law actually consider it as an offense? What protections does the Kenyan legal systems offer around marital consent and issues around marital rape?
Okay, that will take me back to the Sexual Offences Act of 2006. That was 2 years after Arsenal had won the EPL. So it's quite a long time. And so when that bill was being debated, I remember there was a lot of heat in the August House. The men were up in arms, and it was a very good bill, and it had that component of marital rape, but it had to be removed. Actually, it was removed and negated. If you look at section 45 of 43, sorry, of the Sexual Offences Act, there's a clause that was added there at the end, 5. That clause, section 43 defines what rape is, sexual offenses. And then there's a clause that is added there, 5, subsection 5, which says that these definitions or these definitions of these acts will not cannot take place if the man is married to a woman.
The woman.
Yeah. So it stipulates all the offenses there and then negates it. So when I look at that, I would think that the Sexual Offences Act discriminates a good number of women because many married women are discriminated. And then I'll go back to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Chapter 4. Chapter 4, when it is talking about the rights, it does not say that these rights are for married women, these rights are for single women, and all that. So the Constitution gives the rights to each and every person, individual, and it does not give it to a unit, at the husband and wife. It gives the rights to the wife and also to the husband. So the wife has a right for human dignity. She has a right not to be discriminated, and this small part of the Sexual Offences Act discriminates against women. And if a law, Paul, goes against the grand norm, the Constitution, what does the Constitution say? That particular law is?
Everyone has equal protection of the law.
Yeah. And that part that is inconsistent with the Constitution is null and void.
It has to be decided so by a competent court.
Yeah, that's where jurisprudence comes in. And there are several cases. Maybe we look at them later.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I can, let me first respond to what Apollo mentioned that I'm commercializing marriage when I mentioned meeting of the mind. And for me, I was relating marriage to a contract legally, in the sense that everything you do, there must be that sync of the mind.
Yeah.
For me, that's how I define consent. And if I can bring it home, it's to say if there are sexual favors, that are requested or that are demanded, quote to quote, within a marriage setup. Again, we have to invoke the concept of meeting of the mind. If meeting of the mind, does not, manifest within that conversation, I wouldn't say consent would then be said to exist.
Okay.
You understand? So if I request sexual favors, and those sexual favors are not honored, it means there is no meeting of the mind. And for me, there is no consent at that point. The same way within a contract. When someone says, I offer, and then Judy says, no, I don't accept, there's no meeting of the mind, there's no agreement. That cannot be said to be. That cannot be said to be a contract. You understand? So I wanted to give that a relationship, because there are so many, marriage and contract, they are similar ingredients. That's why I brought that out. And that's why I find it abhorrent that we are discussing, consensuous sex, within marriage. That as long as you're within an institution of marriage, sex is automatic and self-activating. That cannot be the case, to the extent that it is even codified, under Section 43.5 of the Sexual Offences Act. But having said that, allow me to go back to the myths. Remember, I mentioned myths and excuses that men have as to why, there is no, when it comes to sex within marriage, there should be no consent. I demand, I get. These are some of and people who have demystified, or men who have demystified those myths and excuses, have been able to avoid this conversation, and they are able to live, good lives and happy lives, with your spouses. And these are some of the myths and excuses that men put forward. Allow me to mention that as a man, I'm a superior being to a woman. That is one of the excuses and a myth. And this is how men are socialized. The other one is, my superiority stems from my physical strength, which I perceive to surpass that of a woman, and also from a cultural, religious, and historical justification of male hegemony over women. A man or a boy is socialized in that manner, that I'm a superior being. So the point here is, if I demand or I request sexual favors and they are not forthcoming, by the end of the day, I have, superior strength. I can overpower you, and this is within a marriage setup. These are excuses men give. The other one is that my women must be placed under my tutelage and authority if they are to realize themselves. You get that? For a woman to realize herself, to understand who she is, she must be placed under a man.
Okay.
These are I'm talking about myths and excuses, and these are myths and excuses people are living and practicing. The other one is that a woman commits many mistakes purposely, for which she must be punished, so that just like a child, she can be promptly corrected. We all understand, and I'm not going to mention names. There are communities, within this great republic that perceive women as children. You see, now those are again myths and excuses. If you're a child, I do whatever I want to do with you. The other one is that punishing women frequently establishes a proper hierarchy of the sexes and the social structure power. So I must continue punishing her. The other one is, most women appreciate that they are punished to improve them for their own good. You understand? I've not personally interacted with a woman, who has acknowledged that, but I've heard that there are women who say, bwana yangu hajanichapa kwa hivyo hanipendi. Sometimes when I have been abused out there, I am entitled to commit violence against my spouse or other women who do not understand my state and do not appropriately comfort me as an act of self-affirmation. We have those men. I went to work. My boss was on my case, so I'm stressed. I don't have this, I don't have money, I don't have this. So for me to be self-affirmed, I must go and, harass a woman or do this or do that. And my women are my property. And as with property, the owner has the power to use and abuse. When the threat of violence hangs over a woman like a sword of whatever, the woman's good behavior is perpetuated and guaranteed. That violence must be perpetual towards a woman for her discipline, to be intact. And violence against women is not really violence as occurs in other spheres of society. These are some of the things these are some of the myths and excuses that men have put forward. And I'm being very, very practical to perpetuate, marital rape. And this is exacerbated by what Apollo has said. that we have the Sexual Offences Act that says, marital rape cannot exist, within a marriage. I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, just to bring you back and to just take you also back to what Apollo was talking about, discrimination by the Sexual Offences Act.
Yes.
So does this mean we don't have a legal framework that protects women who have been assaulted by their husbands within the marital setup? Assuming I know my partner is a chronic cheat, sleeps around with everyone, but they do not want to have any sexual relations with this person, specifically because of the multiple affairs that this person has.
Allow me to go first. Your question is multi-layered. Multi-layered in the sense that you've asked, number one, do we have a legal framework? That is one. That was the first. Whether a legal framework exists, I would say yes. Okay? And then now the second limb is, what do I do after that? So when we are discussing the legal framework, we must discuss the gaps within that legal framework that does not, provide remedy, to women who face sexual violence.
Okay.
So we must discuss those gaps, even as we discuss what legal frameworks exist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think Paul has answered it correctly. There is a way that you can seek redress. And let me say this. If you look at the hierarchy of our laws, the Constitution comes first. And Constitution cannot be questioned. And it states that any law that is inconsistent with the Constitution, actually it's null and void, it ceases to exist. The Constitution is above it, supreme. If you look at the Bill of Rights, Chapter 4 of the Constitution, it's very comprehensive. And the rights that you are given there, you can seek redress from the Constitution itself. And I would say this, the Sexual Offences Act was passed in 2006. The Constitution came in 2010. If that particular amendment, 43(5), came after 2010, it wouldn't have seen the light of day. It wouldn't have passed. That time, the parliament was male-dominated. In fact, how many members of parliament were there? Less than 20, about 18 or something. And if you look at that, and now, then it's very different. So, if your constitutional rights are violated, Judy, you can seek redress. And the courts of law can give you your remedy. So if a woman doesn't want to have sex with the husband, she cannot be forced. And it's her right. It's guaranteed in the Constitution. The Sexual Offences Act is a statute, and it is subordinate to the Constitution.
Okay. So just to what Paul had said, he's acknowledged that we have a legal framework to address it, but then it has the gaps. But also, before he talks about the gaps, we're talking about consent within the marriage setup. So we also have laws that govern the union, that the unit of marriage, like the Marriage Act. So as you talk about the gaps within the Sexual Offences Act, it's my wish that you also talk about what the Marriage Act talks about when it comes to consent. Does it have a way to address this issue of marital rape?
Okay. Thank you, Judy. Let me address the gaps first. This is the number one gap. No one has come out to address marital rape. No one has addressed it. Unless now, because you cannot, any normal Kenyan, the best recourse would have been raped. So you'll walk into a police station. And then, legal remedies or procedure should ensue. But that is not the case, because this is an offense that has not been recognized. If you look at the Sexual Offences Act, or if you look at the Penal Code, in fact, polisi itaenda kuchekelea, unasema umerepiwa na bwana yako kivipi? Sio ni bwana yako. So, unless now you go to the High Court, there's the Human Rights and the Constitution and Human Rights Division, and then you file a constitutional petition, seeking redress because of that violation. And the redress here would come in form of, damages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or you ask the court to pronounce itself. You asking the court, even as you come to my aid as a court, seeking damages because of psychological and physical, trauma that has undergone. I would wish that you also, pronounce yourself on Section 43.5, and that requires money. For you to file a constitutional petition, Judy, you need maybe $1 million to do that. How many people would do that? Unless now you're doing a class action suit, where now you bring so many people who have been affected.
Yeah.
For me, that is the number one gap. The laws exist, okay? An international legal framework exists. We've ratified that as Kenya, but we've not come up with an operational statute to effect it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Number two, the number two gap. Let me address the number two gap and then give it.
Hold on, I'll take you back to that. Meanwhile, I wanted Apollo to also, because we're looking at the legal frameworks. So I also wanted you to mention briefly about the Marriage Act and how it protects spousal consent. If there is, and if there are not, probably can also mention the gaps while I'll address Paul shortly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Judy. I have my Marriage Act here, and it's actually silent on consent and marital rape. Very silent. The only consent it talks about is in Section 11, whereby it says that a union is not a marriage if at the time of making the union, that is Section E, the consent of either party has not been freely given. And Part 2, which says that consent is not freely given where the party who proposed to give it is influenced by coercion or fraud, mistaken as to the nature, and so on. So this is a consent to marriage itself.
Okay.
Otherwise, it doesn't address consent within the institution of marriage for conjugal activities. But let me say this. I support what Paul has said because we have so many examples to look at out there. Number one, I said that England outlawed marital rape. That is in 1991. That was by Lord Keith, I think. Lord Keith. He's the one who made that ruling and overruled what the Hale Doctrine had said. But to add on that, in Africa, there are countries which have outlawed it, like Botswana. Botswana has made a very good jurisprudence against marital rape. And South Africa. South Africa, they have an act that actually outlaws marital rape. And India. And India is a common law jurisdiction, so we can borrow from that. Even if the woman won't get redress from criminal courts, you can seek it as damages. Since Paul introduced the commercial aspect of free consent and offer and acceptance, it can be sought in a civil suit.
Okay.
However, the sexual laws in Kenya are evolving. Up to 2006, we didn't have a Sexual Offences Act. It was all derived from the Penal Code. It's a section of the Penal Code that defined what rape is. So you can imagine that. And now we have the Sexual Offences Act, which is a very good act document, but then discriminates on about 50% of women. So I think we are evolving, and it's up to our parliamentarians to make amends on where they went wrong. But the problem is these guys are yet even to administer the 2/3 gender rule. Are they the same people we are expecting them to amend the Sexual Offences Act? We have a long way to go, but it can be done with advocacy.
Just now that you've mentioned the 2/3 gender rule, that's why I wanted to take Paul back. Because even the 2 or 5 women that we have in parliament, 2 of them would be silent, 3 of them would be dancing on TikTok. Like they actually don't even care about representing women's needs in that particular house. And I'll take you by a quote by a certain philosopher. I don't remember his name, but he was saying, do not argue about what a good man should be. Become one. So now, because you are in the legal spaces, so what can you do? Can you petition Parliament? Can you write to them? What can you do, you as Apollo, you as Paul, to ensure that this becomes law and there's a way that a woman can report the husband of assaulting or raping her?
Okay. Thank you, Judy, for that question. And I like the trajectory you're taking, because we're looking at this issue from what kind of solutions can we offer? Because I think we've been discussing problems.
Yes.
I love that. Number one, there's a technical aspect that in the short term, there is a legal gap that women can capitalize on. You can indeed approach the court and of course say that I've been raped by my husband, okay, and push, for the rape charges to be preferred. Fine, I know the man is going to do, to invoke the defense of marriage, but what if technically you're not married? You know what I mean? You're unable to produce a certificate. So as a woman, I can always deny. I can always say, during cross-examination, this is where everything happens. Okay, are you married to me? Then someone will say, yes. Are you sure? Yes. Explain to court how you're married to me. Is that marriage? No, that kind of thing. So that is one way, because it's easier and everyone can approach. It's easier to approach the court that way because we are not expending resources. For me, that would be number one solution. But how about those ones who are legally married and can be able to produce a certificate? So number one is to create what we call a movement or a critical mass, okay, and start advocacy at that point. And this is where you bring together. Social justice movements or organizations. This is where you bring the civil society organizations. This is where you bring the media. This is where you mobilize everyone. And for instance, you say every day we are going to dedicate a day. Let's say every Wednesday. Say no to marital rape. Legislate on marital rape. Create a buzz around it. Make it a national conversation. And be very intentional about it. And I'm talking about campaigns here. It has been done. Look at what has happened the last week. The last week, the only thing we've been talking about is Buterega.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we've been talking about. Actually, yesterday I saw JKL had lined up content creators, I don't know, bloggers, I don't know who is who, to discuss about, plays, political starters and stuff. It was made a conversation. And that's where everything must start. Because we have the human resource and we even have the monetary resource to start those kind of conversations. If Botswana, if South Africa, if India have those countries have pronounced themselves on marital rape, why shouldn't we? We've had a conversation in this country on Sexual Offences Act, amendment of Sexual Offences Act. But I'm surprised that the conversation has always taken the trajectory of we need to redefine defilement, or what we call statutory rape. We need to redefine age of consent, But no one talks about marital rape. As we speak now, we have a standalone committee of the National Council on the Administration of Justice that is looking into the Sexual Offences Act. The vehicles are there, and the conversation. We have an abundance of research that has been done on that particular topic. So it's just a question of how intentional are we. Some of us were in the legal space and we are budding lawyers and road scholars. We can write on this topic, until Jesus Christ comes back, because that's the only way you can build momentum around it. And then that is one. But number two, you have to get yourself quote to quote friendly legislators. So we must get this caucus, because that's the only way we are going to spread our spheres of influence within that august house. because it's the only house that can be able to move, some of those conversations. And I know it is going to face a lot of resistance, because some of the people who are sitting in that parliament are, they are the worst of perpetrators, of marital rape, of statutory rape, of defilement, name it. So it's going to face us. But with momentum from outside, I believe this is a battle that, because we are ripe for that. As Apollo has said, the legal framework around sexual offenses has really, really, really evolved. Courts are pronouncing themselves every other day on laws that have perpetually discriminated women. They are doing that. The courts are doing quite a good job. But again, even as we do the court work, even as we do class action suits, we cannot forget to build movements. We cannot forget to do advocacy. We cannot forget to keep having these conversations.
Okay, I'll just because of time, I think we're on 24 minutes. I'm really even surprised. So when we started the show, you talked about the myths. Apollo has just mentioned the 2/3 rule. So I just want us to talk about the culture, religion, tradition, the role it plays in the issues of consent within marriage, because we are social beings. And most of the time you'd find us referring to society. What does the society say? What does the society expect of me? Me as a man, I cannot vote for a woman. The societal expectations. And sometimes I find myself asking, who is this society? Who voted for this society? Who wrote these rules within the society? And even while you address the issues surrounding culture, religion, and tradition, the other question I'd like to pose to both of you, do you think Kenya, being a patriarchal society, exacerbates this particular topic of discussion that we're having today? I'll start with you, Apollo. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Now, one thing about African traditional culture, which Paul knows that I'm a fan of, actually, my jurisprudence is based on traditional cultural practices. The traditional cultural practice, Judy, is innocent in terms of marital rape. This bad habit was borrowed from the common law, the Hell Doctrine. That is what we are still using up to now. Because Paul, in pre-colonial times, were there rape was something that was alien and frowned upon in the African cultural setup. And actually, the fact that our forefathers had polygamy, several women, I don't think the issue of consent would arise. Because I will take, for example, let's look at the Maasai community, because that's the culture that I've interacted with. And actually, I can talk about it firsthand. When a man has 2-3 wives and one wife gives birth, then she is off duty in terms of conjugal activities until the baby stops breastfeeding. That is, so there is no way that man will go after the lady. That the consent will be with the others. So that solves one part. Now, if you come to, you talked about religion?
Yes.
Now, religion recommended one man, one wife. And this one man would want conjugal activities all the time. So don't you say that's where the issue comes in?
So
the problem. That's where the problem starts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you recommend that we go back to polygamy, where if I have 4 wives, then if this one does not consent today, I'll go to the next one?
I don't recommend. The law recommends. Here is the Marriage Act. In a polygamous, the Marriage Act recognizes the polygamous union. Yeah.
Okay. Paul.
This is my take. Judy, and thank you for that question. I'll start by saying marital rape is bad manners. There's no excuse for that.
No.
Raping a woman is bad manners. Doesn't matter whether to your wife, as long as there's no consent. That is bad manners. That should not be condoned.
That's true.
That's where I'll start. And number two, I would also say that we are products of our socialization. That's who we are. And how are we socialized? We are socialized culturally. We are socialized religiously. No. We are socialized technologically. Civilization has also socialized us. We are product of who we interact with, how we see the world. And even as all these things happen, and sometimes I agree with Apollo that the African traditional society, all culture is innocent in all this. Let's decide every case on its own merit, because we are all socialized. Judy, we've been here with you for the last, 4 years or so. We've been here, okay? But there are things you do that I don't do. There are things I do that you don't do, okay? So we cannot come back and blame, this setup that we work in, that it has influenced me to do what I do and it has influenced you to do what you do. I think it all boils down to you as an individual, to know that what I'm doing is right, or what I'm doing is wrong. It also boils down to you to look at what socializes you, what influences you, so that you can make a conscious decision on what to consume and what not to consume. Because there are aspects of my culture that I don't consume because I find them,
Repugnant.
exactly, that's the word. I find them repugnant. There are religious customs or norms that I don't associate with, but there are some that I associate with. There is aspect of technology that I consume. There is some aspects of technology that I don't consume. Okay? So again, I'm just saying it's bad manners. But also, because for me to raise up my hand and beat a woman, it's a decision I make. Should I do this or should I not do it?
Okay, just to hapo tu kwa, because when you started to respond to this, you said that we are a product of our socialization. When you began, you talked about myths. You even mentioned some communities that are still practicing some aspects. So you're talking as Paul, but how can this person who still believes in this thing be reached, be talked to? Because like it's someone grows, like let's say if I have a child and it's a man, and I'm in an abusive relationship with the father of this child, chances are very high the child I'm raising is going to replicate what the father is doing, not until they make a very sober decision not to. And at times you make that sober decision not to based on your knowledge, education, exposure, and a lot of things. So now how can we that have the knowledge that that is not what is supposed to be done, how can we share this knowledge amongst these people that have been socialized that way? Because if we leave it at bad manners, then it's going to be bad manners for a million of years to come.
Thank you. Two things for me. Two things. Number one, I would say again, we are product of how we are socialized. That is the bottom line. I'll still go back to parents. How do you raise your child? Because it's very critical on how you raise your child, because what you teach your child, especially between the age of 5 and 11, never departs them. Never departs them. You raise them in the right way, those children will never depart from that, because they grow knowing that I should do this and I should not do that. It's very, very important. But number two is a value system, Judy. A value system. As a nation, we must be very, very intentional in inculcating a value system. And I'll give you an example. For between 1978 and 2002, this country was subjected to the Kanu rule, or the Kanu era, and we lived in an era where we didn't, even form an idea that we can be civilized. You know, being enslaved socioeconomically, legally, everything was a norm. It's something that we had accepted. These are the way people should live. We had not experienced good life, for lack of a better word. Okay? But it only took, 1 month, 2 months for people to realize, haya kumbe tunaweza ishi vizuri. I don't know whether you're getting me.
Yeah.
It just took one person or a group of people to take reins of this country for people to go out there and tell police officers, no, we cannot give you bribe. We should not do this. In fact, we should be arresting you. It only took that group of people for some corrupt fellas to say, no, if I go to the office, I think I'm going to be arrested because of what we've been doing. It was a value system. It was a value culture that was inculcated. Okay? It only took that government to come and say, kulipa ushuru ni kufanya nini? Ni kujitegemea. And people started appreciating. So I think I should not hide my money. I think I should, use my money and pay.
Yeah.
I know you get where I'm getting at. It only takes, for me, from where I sit, I think even 1 week is enough to inculcate a value system that, number one, respects everyone, respects women, and stuff like that. We just have to be intentional about it.
That's very true. Actually, Judy, back when I was in secondary school, I was in a day school called Aquinas High School at Bahati. And I used to commute daily. It was very normal in KBS, full of people, seated and standing, for a person to light a cigarette and smoke it in a bus. Imejaa. Nothing changed. Right now, you can't dare that. Even in the streets of Nairobi, you don't smoke just anyhow. So things can be changed. But two things. We have to change how we obsessed with politics. I'm a teacher. And I was looking at that halabaloo that was created by the Butere Girls play.
Yeah.
Which was okay. But do you know, Judy, there were so many plays that were presented about domestic violence on the same stage. And they never created any. And they were never, no one focused on them. So why do we focus so much on politics and politicians and then ignore things that can change the social setup? Because those plays are a very good way to instill change and show people what is actually happening. A play on marital rape can do a very good job in changing people's minds. Number two, the curriculum. Right now, the kids are doing social studies. I don't know why we should be teaching them about Vasco da Gama and not about the real things. Domestic violence is bad. Such things, real things that they can associate with. So we start from the base and then we move up. As we also petition the parliamentarians to, I know Mheshimiwa Mili can do. She was actually part and parcel and a very key cog in the Sexual Offences Act of 2006.
Yeah.
I remember her at one point walking out with a number of parliamentarians because one of the MPs had said something like, an African woman does not say yes. And if she says yes, she's a prostitute. Just imagine an MP saying that on the floor of the House. It prompted a walkout from... so we can create awareness. And what you are doing here at Haki FM is a very good thing. Educating the masses on their rights. Ignorance of law is no defense. So everyone should know law. Thank you.
Okay. I was just looking at our WhatsApp and we have a question from Rita. Rita is saying, "Hi Judy, I'm enjoying the show from Athi River. My question is based on your discussion. Does a woman lose the right to her body after marriage?"
Her name is Rita. Rita, It's very unfortunate, but it's the truth that we're having that kind of conversation in the first place. That as a woman, you feel I lose my right to my body just because I get married. What that does is to degrade the institution of marriage, in the first place. And unfortunately, in so many setups within this great country of ours, that is the reality. It is the reality. In fact, it's not just about losing your body, it's losing yourself. So many women lose themselves in marriage to the extent that you don't have a say. You lose yourself psychologically, you lose yourself skill wise, you lose yourself knowledge wise. You're reduced to a shell. And I've seen these things with my own eyes. You lose yourself. You used to be a very good typist, you can't type again. You used to be a very good, you used to have very good oratory skills, they are gone. You lose your esteem, you lose everything because someone has made a conscious and deliberate decision to do exactly that. The word they use is I'll put you in your space.
Place.
In your place. That's the word. I'll put you in your place. That's where you belong. To an extent that even your own child, the child you've given birth to, has more right and say and confidence than the mother. It's quite unfortunate. And I agree with Apollo when you say these are the conversations we should be having.
Okay, so we also have a question from Winnie. Winnie saying she's enjoying the show from Wihoko. And the question is, are there different requirements to prove sexual assault or rape against a spouse?
Okay, different requirements or the standard of proof or something.
And the question is, are there different requirements to prove sexual assault or rape against a spouse?
No, there isn't. Rape is rape, whether from a spouse or from whoever. It's rape. And if it happens under the marriage institution, it is just rape. And it's proved just the same way the other rape cases are proved. So it's no different. In fact, Paul, if we started to put boundaries on ati hii ni rape ya marriage, kwa hivyo si mbaya kama ile, it will be like going back to those policemen at police station whereby you go to report, a woman goes to report marital rape and anaenda kwa chief. That's they take it it's as a very light thing, not knowing that the supreme document that we use has actually granted that person rights. And as from what Rita said there, a person does not lose your body or integrity by marriage. It doesn't work that way. The person remains as a person, and that person's rights are guaranteed under the Constitution.
Okay. We also have, I don't know if this, I can put this as a question or a statement. This is Beryl, tuned in from Upper Hill, Flamingo Towers. I just wonder who is that. And she's saying, I hate this discussion. I hate the laws of this country. So trauma is trauma. And is there any difference in the trauma faced by a 14-year-old girl and a 20-year-old girl in the case of non-consensual intercourse with her husband?
Trauma is trauma.
You see, the first 14 and 20, the sexual offense against underage is defilement. That's a very serious crime. That one cannot be. Maybe we'll need another day to discuss it. But as for trauma, Paul talked about the sword of Damocles. There was this king who had this habit of placing a sharp sword above his throne. And that sword was to remind him that anytime he can perish. And Paul actually quoted that as what married women are going through. You see, if Judy, you're in a relationship that you're not happy about, and rape occurs all the time, you won't do your things the way you're supposed to do. You won't be efficient. So what happens? your productivity goes down. But if this man could realize that what the Black Americans say, a happy wife, happy life, then you'll excel. You'll excel. It is actually mistreating your wife is like just undercutting yourself, because hamtaendelea, kutakuwa na shida throughout kwa boma, pesa mtatafuta saa ngapi? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as we took on like 2 minutes, Paul, unaniangalia aje?
It's Arsenal. Ni Arsenal.
No, to Arsenal.
Hiyo shida yote inatoka kwa Arsenal.
So just as we, though this is for personal, like an introspection or everything. So if you could change one thing about how we view marriage in Kenya, what will it be? Paul?
I'll still go back to meeting of the mind. In Latin, we say consensus ad idem.
Consensus ad idem.
Consensus ad idem. Meeting of the mind. It's an agreement.
Okay.
If there's no syncing of the mind for me, I think we should not coexist if there's no meeting of the mind. Actually, if there's no meeting of the mind, you're not coexisting in the first place, because that is what is able, you're able to break all the barriers. You're able to lay down the rules. You're able to understand these are the buttons I should not put. That kind of thing. Because you've talked of the sword of I'm unable to.
Damocles.
Yeah. No.
Damocles.
That one. When you have a sword, hanging over your head, it means there's no meeting of the mind. You're being coerced.
Yeah.
For me, that's how I would look at it. So, that person who you're able to understand, you're able to understand each other. You're able to see things, the same way. And if you're unable to see things, the same way, you can agree, to. That is supposed to be nile nakumbuka tukisoma ile kitabu ile ya fasihi kwetu siku njema. Siku njema, there was this character, the main character, his name is Kongoya. Kongoya lived in a utopic world. That world where everything is good. That's the kind of world he aspired. So when we talk about marriage, that's the kind of marriage I would wish to see in everyone, where you're able to agree and disagree and still continue coexisting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apollo.
Thank you. Actually, two can walk. They cannot work together unless they agree. And I take these. There is an example I like using. I've observed it from the Matatu crew. There's the driver and the conductor. Judy, hawa jamaa wawili wakikosana, hiyo gari iendangi. In fact, wakikosana tu asubuhi hivi, hiyo gari wanaipaga, hapo wanapigia mwenyewe. They cannot work together.
Yeah.
So actually marriage should be like that. Unless the two agree and work together, they won't succeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I thank you so much. We are it's exactly 10. Nilikuwa nadhani leo tutaongea mpaka 10:30, but I think we need to find time to discuss this more, especially because we've actually left out a lot of things because we were time bound. But thank you so much for availing yourselves today to come. The knowledge, mtaniachia hizi karatasi zenyu, and then I can we can write probably an article or just publish whatever I
can, if you'd allow me just a second. Our listeners, if you get time, go and read this book by Professor Kibuza Kibwana. It's called The Law and Status of Women in Kenya. It's a 1996 book, The Law and Status of Women in Kenya, to give you a very good insight or picture of how we've treated our women as Kenyans, the kind of trauma we've put them through, and those who have survived the tales they've come back to tell, and of course those who have survived and those who have lived good lives, so that we're able to balance between the bad and the ugly, and draw a conclusion on the kind of future we would want to have. It's called Law and Status of Women in Kenya by Kibuza Kibwana.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking time to come to Haki FM, Oasis of Justice. It's been an enlightening discussion. So next time I'll bring a woman. Nisikie perspective yake. It's not like you guys have been biased. No, you've not been biased, but I'll need to spice it some more. But thank you so much.
We hear from the horse's mouth. And Judy, you said that I can request a song.
Yeah, please do.
I'm a fan of reggae. So the song that I would request is a reggae song by Bunny Wailer. It's called Boderation. Boderation.
From the word
moderation. Boderation.
From the word border.
Yeah, from the word border. Exactly, that one. It talks about the current state that we are in. You listen to its lyrics, you see Kenya in